You heard about James. Now it's your turn to hear about Jon. So let's do a quick introduction.
All right. So, hello everybody. I'm Jon Soberg. I'm a partner at MS&AD Ventures. It's I know it's a terrible name for a VC. We're actually named after I have one investor into my fund, which is a large insurance company in Japan called Mitsui Sumitomo. So that's the MS. We have a mandate to try to invest in companies that are going to make a lot of money, just like you would expect from a VC. Part of our mandate, though, is also to help to build a sustainable future. And so we do pay close attention to companies that actually can make a positive impact on the world, not just on the money part. And like James said, we've known each other for 12 years, 13, something. It's been a while. So, yeah, I'm proud to be supporters of Pledge.
It's actually quite rare to see a panel where there's a founder and investor. So it's it's an interesting coupling. But how did you convince him to invest? What was the trick?
You guys all want the secrets, huh? Well, I think with Jon, and by the way, I want to brag about Jon for a minute, because here in Silicon Valley, everyone follows the hotshot VCs who have the big blog or they say the controversial stuff on X. This guy is one of the best investors I've ever met. I think he's had 7 IPOs, top 100 seed investor, but he's super under the radar. He's super candid, and I think one of the first times we met when I built my first text messaging company, we drove actually to LAX, and then when I was in San Francisco, he drove me from SFO to SFO. So we got to spend a few hours together, and I got to see the way he thought. Super analytical. He wanted the data, and I think when it came to raising money for Pledge, the market size and early traction with another co-investor was really meaningful, right? Like, the space is a big space, but I also had another investor who was going to lead the round, and we had some comfort. He had some familiarity with me. Now tell the real story, Jon.
Well, I think I got the trick. Step 1, you lock yourself up with an investor. You basically force him not to leave the room or the car, and then you convince him, right?
Yes. Yep.
So that is the trick, but we usually know where the exits are. So no, I'm kidding. But no, I recall the car ride quite well. I think we were at some event here in San Francisco, and I live in Palo Alto, so I was heading that way, and James had to go to the airport, so I told him I'd drop him off. You know, it's worth getting to know people. I think the core point I would make is the relationships matter. So you can't just expect to walk in 30 minutes or an hour and have somebody decide to write a check. That's not really the way it works. You have to build some trust, and you have to get to know people a little bit. And so building those relationships is probably the best advice I can give anybody. As far as Pledge goes, obviously I knew James. I knew of his track record. We had known each other and stayed in touch for years on a couple of different things too, I think. So we had more than just a few touch points along the way. With Pledge, and I think in general, you're right. The market size is always a question. You know, can you figure out how to address that market is also another question. So I think, and for me at least, I don't analyze mission-driven companies in a completely separate way than I look at any other company. So I think, to me, what I've learned over the years is, I even tried to raise a fund in 2016 that was going to just do impact, and everybody I talked to said, you know what, if I want to make an impact, I'll donate to a charity, and if I want to make money, I'll invest in a VC, but I'm not trying to do both at the same time, because it doesn't work. I think now, fast forward, you know, like James was saying, there's companies that have proven that that's true, that you can make money and do good. So I think that's sort of out the window, but at the end of the day, you still have to figure out a way to do both. The best way to make an impact on the world is to actually build something that's successful and big enough to make an impact.
I wanted to pose a question. What is a mission-driven company? Like, what is the definition? Because we keep hearing that both in the VC space and in impact VC space and in nonprofit space, and I feel like in general it's such a vague and inspiring statement that it's actually hard to ground it in some form of a definition. But yeah, what do you guys think? James?
Well, I think it's very simply, it's got to be something where the mission of the company is larger than just the product that they're creating, right? So our mission is to power generosity, and the way we think about generosity is nonprofits need funding to go change the world and solve their missions. So I think it's got to be a mission larger than the founder, larger than the product itself.
Makes sense. How about you, John?
So I do agree. There's a lot of talk about it. I don't have a formal definition, but for me, I actually look at the culture of the company. So to me, there's a difference between bolting on, we're going to add some value over here, and something where truly you're trying to do, make an impact, and the whole goal of the company is to make an impact. Patagonia is a great example. They're a clothing company, so you could argue, okay, what's the impact? But it's woven through everything that they do, to use a term that you might throw in there. But truly, it's part of everything that they do. So the people that they hire are going to actually care about that. I think it's the same thing with a mission-driven company, and I tend to think they have advantages because employees care more when they have a mission. You actually end up with, in some cases, better performing companies because of that.
That makes sense. So in a way, it is about people, first of all, right? Because you can convince anyone to become, a billionaire, right? That's a, interesting enough value proposition. But there's something more to what company has to offer, right? Okay, so let's talk about how VCs actually approach these types of companies that should not work in theory, but they kind of work. Pledge is one example of those. Is there a specific metric that you as a VC look at based on the actual numbers and all of these things that VCs tend to ask for, and we all pretend those are real, but not really. But
see, I would actually disagree with you. So I think as soon as you do the numbers thing, that company's out. So I don't think it can be pretend. So when I took a look at Pledge, there's the impact side of it. Can you raise billions of dollars for companies? But the nuts and bolts of this is how many partners are you going to sign up? Are you going to have thousands of charities, or are you going to have 10? And how are you going to get to the audience? So Pledge is doing partnerships with Shopify. That gets them into tens of thousands of merchants they're doing fundraisers on Zoom. And how many people have Zoom now? Maybe 4 years ago, before the pandemic, that was not a big deal. Now it's a big deal. CNN reaches tons and tons of people. So when you think about this, it's a business. It's a fintech company behind the scenes. What they're really doing is a payments solution, and there's tax implications to all this. This is a complicated, fintech business at the end of the day that's doing really good work.
I have a tricky question for you, James. When it comes to investments, venture capital is looking for liquidity. So what is the exit strategy for companies like yours?
Can I just add one more thing to what John said?
Sure.
So peak COVID, it's a story about another investor that joined our cap table. I get this email, and it said, Zoom launches a competition to find the next big killer app built on top of Zoom. We all remember those days, crazy days, masks inside. Glad those days are over, right? And we came up with this idea. We're like, why isn't there a donate button on Zoom? Can you imagine if the whole world could easily donate to every cause? We entered this competition. We ended up second overall, right? And 2 weeks later, after the competition ends, I get an email from the seed investor in Zoom and Zoom itself. And Zoom said, hey, Eric, the founder of Zoom, loves this idea because he believes that Zoom is connecting the world, but he wants them to connect with the world and do more good. And so I'm like, what do you mean? Eric wants to invest in my company? Really? We're not even fundraising. And the head of corp dev's like, no, seriously, we want to get this done in the next few weeks before Zoomtopia. Wow. And I'm like, okay, send me your diligence list. And it was the easiest close I've ever had in my life. It was 3 weeks. the diligence list was crazy, but they didn't push back on anything because the founder wanted to do it. And my message to everyone is, this is a non-traditional VC, right? A corporate VC, strategic VC, if you will. But for corporate VC, it's part of their mandate. He needs to innovate around the edges of Zoom, and it was really important for their ESG. It was really important for all these other, not just numbers, but really important to the DNA of that company. So when you're thinking about raising money, you're going to talk to great investors like Jon. You might talk to some corporates, and there might be other variables about what you're building that might be really attractive to them. So I want to give that story. Okay.
That's an amazing story, but we have a tricky question.
Yes. Remind me your tricky question again.
What's the exit strategy?
Oh, the exit strategy.
Yeah.
Right.
The most important VC question.
Well, I think the exit strategy I've been fortunate to build and sell 2 companies before this. And they were in the mobile space and I was depressed. I was having 0 impact. But I think when you build something really valuable, you achieve profitability and growth, the exit strategies, opportunities open up. So for the number one thing, if you're trying to go build a company just to sell it, that usually always fails. Because the life of an entrepreneur, how many entrepreneurs do we have in here? Founders? Y'all are crazy. You know, the highest highs and the lowest lows, and it's every single day, right? So when you try to build something just to sell it, it's not usually gonna work. You gotta build something because you believe that it needs to exist in the world. So you can fight through those tough days, and then as you grow and scale, those exit opportunities come. They might be another company in your space who's a competitor, who's growing faster than you. You go, if we put these 2 companies together, we're gonna dominate the market. It might be, in my space, there's some fintech companies, the Stripes of the world, who go, oh my God, this whole nonprofit sector, I didn't realize there's hundreds of billions of dollars. Whoa, maybe someone like Pledge would help us go faster into that category. So I think my message is build something valuable, get to profitability, grow it, and the exit opportunities will open up.
Amazing. That makes perfect sense. How about you, Jon? What do you think about that answer?
So it's actually,
He's
a good one.
sell it in the next 16 months.
ASAP.
I'm a little counter to what I think you'd hear from a lot of VCs, because I invest typically seed stage, so seed or Series A is my normal, and probably more seed. I actually think it's counterproductive to even think about the exits at that stage. So there's some people who write their investment memos and they say, oh, at the end of the day, we're going to sell to this company, or we're going to IPO and it'll be $10 billion or whatever. And we probably put a little paragraph in ours too and say, there's a whole bunch of ways this could exit. But I think to James' point, at the end of the day, you build something valuable and there will be exits. If you don't build something valuable, it doesn't matter. So all you should really focus on is that. And in this case, again, I think, I've told you a couple times, I think of this as a fintech company, even though it's really, really an impact company. It's both. So the exits aren't going to come from a nonprofit. The exits are going to come from the fintech side, but it's valuable infrastructure that's been built.
Yeah, super interesting perspective in terms of you having to model that to some traditional behaviors in the market, right? And it makes sense that there could be Stripes of the world that could integrate such functionality, and that could become a almost synergetic combination of the platforms. Speaking about technology, let's switch the gears into all these amazing tools that you, James, showcased in terms of just simply the logistics that are required for all of these fundraising activities. I remember, I'm originally from Ukraine, so when Russia full-scale invaded my country, I basically started a nonprofit to do a bunch of things on the ground, from evacuations to humanitarian aid to housing support, and the amount of human effort, the volunteer effort that was required for simply putting things together was just absolutely surreal. Like it sounds like, hey, let's just get some things together and it works, but then you need a landing page, then you need to connect Stripe, you need to connect PayPal, then you have to figure out the custom PayPal button that all of a sudden doesn't work, or something, or it's a deprecated SDK that doesn't connect with Webflow, and all of these things. And all of a sudden, it's such a messy, cluster of things that you have to figure out. And platforms like yours basically simplify all of these logistics. And I wonder, what is the almost like the utopian vision that you see, 5-10 years from now, with AI not being the super intelligence, the AGI, but being the ultimate amplifier of all of these human activities? Like, what's the, something that you envision? You basically wake up and one day and you're like, we reached it. It's amazing.
So the utopian vision for every nonprofit is they put themselves out of business. Imagine, I talked about 800 million people. I think the exact count right now is 773 million people who cannot read. The utopia for me is AI does solve this problem. Room to Read, incredible nonprofit. They go into business because we've solved literacy. Charity Water, unbelievable organization, providing clean water to 100 million people. We've raised millions and millions of dollars for them. They put themselves out of business because we've uplifted 1 billion people out of poverty. We've taught 700 million people how to read. 1 out of 3 Americans, 1 out of 3 kids in America, 1 out of 3 are hungry or living in a food desert. We throw out 40% of our food. How does the richest country that is here in San Francisco, how much food is being thrown out of Whole Foods right now? Like, I think my utopian vision is we're solving these problems, and that we're taking the incredible human capital, that 2% of GDP, and they're becoming artists. They're focusing on other things that they're passionate about, other problems that they can solve.
That's beautiful. In terms of the use cases that, Jon, you're seeing in this space, obviously, after you've had such an amazing success story with Pledge, I'm sure other entrepreneurs are also trying to lock you in a car and basically convince you to do the same. What are other AI use cases that you're seeing? Obviously, all of a sudden, every company is AI agent company nowadays, but what gets you most excited about this space?
I mean, it's actually hard to say because I think it's so broad. AI is impacting everything. So for me, actually, I like companies that, Pledge is a good example, where AI is helping that company to be better at what they're doing. So we haven't invested in a lot of, we're not invested in OpenAI, we're not, some of the core AI companies. Those are, for me at least, hard to invest in because it's hard for me to understand how they're going to remain at the competitive advantage that they have. If you think about Pledge, at the end of the day, AI is driven by data. So James is building one of the largest collections of data on, giving, charities, all of this ecosystem. So that gives him a competitive advantage in the AI space over anybody else who's going to try because there's really proprietary data there. So to me, that's the way I think about AI is how is it being enabled first, and then the use cases are evolving faster than you can think about it. We weren't talking about this a year ago. We didn't even think about this a year ago. At least I didn't. And then James showed it to me a few weeks ago, and it's incredible. It is magic. Anybody can literally become you can launch this overnight. Every school that does a little fundraiser thing, you don't have to do any work anymore. You just type it in and it's done. It's incredible. So I think AI is really going to impact everything. Jeez. AI is really going to impact everything, and so I think you think about it as an enabler for all of the different things that you're working on.
I have a last question before we switch to Q&A. What we're seeing right now in AI space is that LLMs are becoming so good at actually convincing people. Sometimes it's convincing enough to us, to think that there's this super intelligence that is already there, AI overlords that are already controlling the society besides the lizard people. But what do you think about the capabilities of AI to actually communicate to every single person in the world the importance of a given fundraising cause? Because what I've observed is that, sure, in the times of crisis, it's actually relatively easy to explain why you should donate to a given cause. Be it a war, be it, a hurricane, something that, comes, rushes in, people get it. But to 99% of other causes, it's actually really hard, and you have to over-communicate all of these things. And you have to create touch points, 7 touch points for someone to actually, notice it and care and then put their money in. But what do you think about AI's capabilities in that space in terms of bridging the communication gap and personalizing that? Jon?
So I think AI has the potential to almost personalize to a person over time. If you think about it, I actually literally talked to a founder today who said what he's trying to build, and I haven't even figured out what he's doing, is this is for enterprise, if you have 1,000 customers, he wants you to act as though you have 1. So that to me is the power of AI. I could create this, and it shouldn't be too long, the voice, the tone, the hook that might bring me in versus somebody else might look different. So it could be that AI is literally going to customize it on a per person basis, and we're not going to necessarily even pay that much attention. I'll give you another example. If you go to, I think it's TED has started using this software now. You can take a video and it'll translate it into any language, and it'll actually change the lip movements of the actor to match with the language. So if you think about how we've dubbed movies for the last decades and decades, that's not going to be the case anymore. So it'll literally be spoken in everybody's native tongue in the voice of the actor. So you can literally, so that's where we're going, and it's already there basically today.
What's fascinating is AI is essentially creating the communication layer for us that is personalizing not just the language, but the actual mental models, the social norms and values. And for example, for us at Open Babylon, what we're bridging those cultural dimensions. It's not enough to just have the translation of the language. It's adapting models to understand the nuance of Arabic, of Ukrainian, the social norms and values, things that are appropriate there, and bridging that communication so that people understand it from their unique part of the world and the importance of that in relation to what they care about. What do you think about that, James?
Well, I love what you're doing. When I first heard about it, I was blown away, and I think there's a big need in the market for what you're building, so it's really powerful. I agree with what Jon said. I think AI is going to personalize all of our interactions, but ultimately, people want to give when they know that there's going to be an impact that's achieved. So if you personalize the interaction and the experience to me about a cause that doesn't resonate with me, I'm out. But if you personalize the experience and you say, hey James, give $1,000 and we're going to plant 1,000 trees, and here's how we're going to reforest this one area that really matters, and you can show me the data, because this is one of the things that nonprofits have not done well up until fairly recently, where AI is really going to transform it. We go to nonprofits all the time and we're like, tell us exactly when we raise $500,000, what is the impact and how can we deliver that impact and show what that impact is going to be achieved, and then you've changed everything. So where AI can personalize the experience and communicate the impact in a real and tangible way, that I think is the holy grail.
Yeah, the impact reporting, that's huge.